Hey guys, good to see you, in a manner of speaking. Anyway, let's start getting ready for our final exam. This is the poetry unit. We're not real big on poetry in our culture, at least not that we know of, so this might seem a little odd. Folks generally don't have in-between reactions to the poetry unit. They either really like it or really don't. So, whichever spectrum you fall on. I hope it's closer to the liking, but who am I to dictate taste? Anyway, um, things you should know, right? There's no secret, there's no key, no buried treasure map or something to understanding poetry. It's just a matter of paying attention and sort of becoming familiar with the elements of poetry in general. I mean, when we go to see a movie, we go out to the hangar or wherever. We we've seen lots of movies, so we already are familiar, even if not consciously, with the elements that make a movie up. We know the title, we know the credits, we know how character development is done. We know that different scenes are shot from different angles, not shot, but shot with the camera. And we understand what special effects are and so forth. So, and there are different, tropes, different patterns of storytelling and behavior and character development and such that happen in movies, but we know all about those. We're used to them. Okay, we've soaked them in almost by osmosis. Poetry, not as much. So we're going to start by just doing a little getting familiar with the landscape, as it were. And toward that end, these concepts that you see over here are going to be helpful to you. Uh, we'll just start at the top. And these are things that the definitions and so forth you'll need to know for your exam. So let's just start at the top, right? Speaker. The speaker is the voice that's talking to us through a poem. That's it. It's the equivalent of a narrator. You've seen a movie or a TV show in which there's a voiceover and someone is telling the story. Well, that's the speaker is a poem, is equivalent of that. Speaker is really just the narrator of the poem. We just call it the speaker. Okay. Now let's stop and get something clear. Frequently, folks who aren't particularly up on what poetry is will, when they're talking about what's going on in a poem, they'll say, and the poet feels this way, or the poet does this. Well, no, usually what they mean is the speaker, feels this way, or the speaker is doing this, or the speaker is saying this. The poet is the human being that wrote the poem. And a poet is a writer, and a writer has imagination. And a writer can write about things and can write things that she or he doesn't necessarily believe or hasn't necessarily experienced. Okay. A poem is usually fiction to a large degree, even if it is a fictionalized representation of something that the poet has actually experienced or felt or what have you. Okay. So it's usually best to say, the speaker says, or the speaker is being shown to us as feeling, thus and so. When we refer to the poet, we can do that when we say something like, okay, all right, so the poet is using a particular, rhyme scheme or a particular rhythm, or the poet has broken the poem into several different stanzas or something like that. Okay. Or we can say, gosh, what might the poet be wanting us to get at or to figure out through this poem? In those cases, we would refer to the poet when we are talking about something that has to do with the poem as an artifact or the point that a poem might be making. But if we are referring to things that are allegedly happening to whatever person we're imagining, is in the poem, in those cases, generally, we will refer to the speaker. So that's the difference. The poet is the human being that wrote the poem. The speaker is the persona. It's the fictional narrator, as it were, that's talking to us through a poem. Okay, so that's what speaker is. Meter, that's the rhythm of the poem. Now, here's a technical definition. You'll want to write this down. The meter, it is the pattern of emphasized syllables in a line of poetry. The meter is the pattern of emphasized syllables in a line of poetry. That's it. It's the rhythm, right? Meter, it's the pattern of emphasized syllables in a line of poetry. Okay. And there's lots of different meters, you know. Now, for example, hang on, this is going to look weird because I'm going to be typing while I do this. Okay, there's iambic, an iambic meter. Um, an iamb, I-A-M-B. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see what the hell I'm doing. An iamb is two syllables, one that's not emphasized, followed by one that is emphasized. It sounds like ba-da, 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 ba-da. Okay, that is iambic. Okay, now there are other sorts of meters. There's iambic, and you don't really have to know these. I'm just illustrating. There's iambic, there's trochaic, there's dactylic, and my favorite, the meter that was most often used by dinosaurs, the pterodactylic. I just made that last one up, so you don't need to know that. But so there's all sorts of different little poetic terms for the pattern of emphasis in a line of poetry. Now, also, there's usually two words that describe the meter of a poem. The first word tells us what the pattern of syllables is. The second word tells us how many times in a line of poetry that pattern occurs. Sorry, I'll try to look at the camera instead of at the screen. It's kind of weird, kind of hard to do, but you know. So the first word tells us what the pattern of syllables is. The second word tells us how many occurrences of that pattern there are. For example, the most common meter in English language poetry, at least it used to be, is called iambic pentameter. Now, we've already talked about, iambic, right? So that means that there are, where's the damn B on my keyboard? Might be that one. Hey, it is. It's iambic, so it tells us that it's made up of iambs. But all right. Pentameter, Jesus. Pentameter tells us how many instances of that there are. Pent is the Latin word for 5. Meter is the Latin word for meter. It's also the English word for meter. How about that? So in a line of iambic pentameter, there are 5 iambs. Da-da, 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 da-da. That's how it would sound if we wanted just to say da-da instead of actual words. So iambic pentameter, that is or was the most common meter in English language poetry. That'd be a good thing to know for your exam. I mean, that's a very easy question. What's the most common meter in English language poetry, or at least used to be? Iambic pentameter. Hey, there you go. So that's cool. All right, so that's meter. Okay, hang on a second. Okay, I think we're going again. Pardon that little pause. You didn't know it was a pause, but it was a big pause for me. Something was happening elsewhere in the house that I needed to figure out, but now that's done. Okay, so we've done speaker, we've done meter. Rhyme, you know what rhyme is. It's words that sound the same, especially they have the same vowel sound. A round sound on the ground is often to be found if you construct a mound that weighs about a pound. Okay, so that's all rhyme. Specifically in poetry, most often we are familiar or we hear what's called end rhyme. End rhyme is exactly what it sounds like. It's rhyme that happens at the end of a line of poetry, right? That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when I can't remember the rest of it, but that's how it goes. So yeah, it rhymes at the end of the line of poetry. Now there's also internal rhyme. I'm not going to type it out, but internal rhyme is rhyme that occurs within the line itself, the line of poetry. Okay, so um, verse, as it says there, Um, verse, this is a word that has a couple of different meanings. Okay, verse poetry, that term refers to what is also sometimes called lyric poetry, Lyric, lyric poetry. These are short poems, essentially. Um, verse may also refer, as you probably know, to the part of a song that is not the chorus, the lyric part of a song that is not the chorus. And one may speak of a poem as having several verses, which means several, essentially paragraphs. A verse, in one sense, is the equivalent of a paragraph, but it's in a poem instead of in a prose piece. Okay? So a verse can refer to, short poems, a verse, and verse also can refer to essentially the paragraphs within a poem. Okay. Usually, though, when we're talking about the paragraphs, as it were, within a poem, we refer to stanzas. Okay. A stanza is one group of lines within a poem. And there can be stanzas of different sizes. For example, um, a quatrain. That is a stanza comprised of 4 lines. There you go. It's a very, very, very common one. Um, a couplet. That's a stanza comprised of 2 lines. So there you go. Quatrain, couplet. Those are two sorts of stanzas that we find not infrequently. All right. So yeah, this is just exciting as hell, isn't it? Listening to me do this and with the added bonus of me typing things and deleting them from the screen. I understand if you want to pause the recording for a minute and, catch your breath. God knows I need to. Let's move on though. Closed form poetry. Closed form poetry. The term simply refers to a poem that has particular specific characteristics that classify it as a particular type of poem. We'll say it again. Closed form poetry refers to poetry that has certain specific characteristics that classify it as whatever type it is. I know that's kind of vague, but give you an example. A sonnet. A sonnet is a closed form of poetry. A sonnet is a poem that's comprised of 14 lines. It has 4 stanzas, 3 quatrains, and a couplet. It's written in iambic pentameter, and it has a particular rhyme scheme, which is a pattern of end rhyme. There, you don't have to remember those things, but that's just an example of a type of a closed form type of poetry. A sonnet is one form. So that's closed form. Open form poetry. Aha! That refers to poetry that doesn't have any specific characteristics. It doesn't belong to any particular type. It's not a sonnet. It's not, an elegy. It's not a cat who walks into the room. Come here. Come here. Making lots of noise. This is my cat, Giza. She is the feline god of poetry. Bow before her might, puny humans. Anyway, there you go. Stupid cat. Mwah. Anyway, so, if what I just said were a poem, and it was titled Giza, or whatever its title was, it'd be an open form sort of poetry because it doesn't have any particular characteristics. All right, there we go. Let's unbold that. Okay. Narrative poetry. Narrative poetry is poetry that tells a story. You're going to read, or maybe have already started, I hope, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. That is a narrative poem because it tells a story. Narrative poetry tends to be longer than verse poetry or lyric poetry. Okay. Just because a story tends to be longer than just a little statement of emotion. Okay. Iambic pentameter. Well, I guess you do need to know that. We talked about that earlier. That's the most common meter in English language poetry. It's in iambic pentameter, a line of poetry has 10 syllables all in all, because each 2 syllables make up an iamb. There are 5 iambs in a line of iambic pentameter. Here you go. We said that earlier, so I won't really say anything more about that here. All right, tone. Tone is sort of the emotional atmosphere of a poem. The tone can be angry, a tone can be sorrowful, a tone can be nostalgic, a tone can be sad, which is essentially sorrowful. A tone can be regretful, which is a more specific type of sad. A tone can be optimistic, it can be hopeful. Think of an emotion, and a tone can probably, be that. So that's what it is. The tone is sort of the emotional atmosphere that is happening in a poem. I don't know if you can see these ears, but that's what I'm looking at. I've been colonized. Actually, Giza's nickname in my house is Belgium because she's a colonizer. Wherever you sit down, she will come and stake her claim. There you go. Sit, ye lousy imperialist pig, you, although you're a cat. Okay, denotation. Ow, that's Belgium sinking her claws into my knee. Denotation. You probably already know this word actually, but the next 2 words, right? The next 3: denotation, connotation, and inference. These all reply to to the meaning. That stop it was to the cat, not to you. Those all refer to the meaning of a word or a line or a phrase or whatever. Okay, but on the word level, denotation means what a word signifies in very concrete terms. Think of it as the, quote, dictionary definition, end quote, of a word. Cat, the denotation of the word cat means this sort of animal. You all know what a cat is, okay? Now, hang on a second. Let me unbold that. Right. Okay. Connotation, that's more interesting. Connotation refers to the meaning or the impressions that sort of surround a word, even if they're not part of it. Take the word cat, for example. Cat, the denotation, or sorry, the denotation of cat means this sort of animal. Okay. The connotation of cat is, well, it's this sort of animal. To me, the connotation of cat is my cat, and she is my cat, and she loves me as I love her. The love of a man for a good cat. And it's a very comforting connotation. Yes, I know, because my cat's always there, and hopefully will be for several more years. And I dig my cat. So there you go. So it's a very positive thing. Um, some words have negative connotations. The word abortion, okay. The the denotation of abortion is the premature stopping of a process. That's what it means to abort something is to stop a process or stop, something that's going on prematurely before its scheduled end. That's the denotation of abortion. There's nothing controversial about it. But the connotation of abortion, oh, that's different now, isn't it? In our culture, we have folks who get mightily upset. We have folks who, assert that their faith makes them have to be completely against abortion. You want to say abortion of what? I mean, if I'm making cereal and I smell that the milk I'm pouring into my bowl is bad, I will abort the process. I will stop making that cereal. Does your faith mean that I should have continued making that cereal even though it's going to probably make me sick? Probably not. But the connotation of abortion refers specifically to the process of ending a human pregnancy early. So the denotation and the connotation, they're connected, but they're not remotely the same thing. Okay. So let's see here. We've done denotation, we've done connotation. The word inference. Inference means it refers to the meaning or the conclusion that we draw from a word or a phrase or a situation, a conclusion or meaning that has not been explicitly stated. It has not been denoted in concrete terms, but we infer it. Okay. Um, if I walk into a room and there's a vase with flowers, as though I would have a vase with flowers, that's broken and on the floor, and this creature is sitting beside the broken vase and flowers, looking very satisfied. I would infer this creature probably knocked the vase off whatever it was on. Now, I didn't see it, but I would infer that, and it'd probably be a pretty sound inference. Okay, we infer things all the time. You know, if somebody says, hey, you wearing a watch? Or hey, do you have your cell phone with you? We infer they want to know what time it is. Okay. Um, so often if they say, hey, are you wearing a watch? We'll say, yeah, it's 3:14. They'll say, I didn't ask you what time it is. I asked you if you're wearing a watch. I just wondered. You don't see people wearing watches very often. Oh. But usually if somebody says, hey, you wearing a watch? Our inference that they want to know what time it is would be correct. Okay. Inference is different from implication. To imply something is when we are trying to communicate meaning without saying it specifically. A poet may try to imply meaning, and in fact usually does imply meaning or imply a point through her or his poem without explicitly stating it. So to imply something, you're trying to communicate meaning without saying it explicitly. And hopefully the readers will infer what that meaning is. These are sort of looking at the same thing from different angles. To imply is to communicate meaning or try to without saying it. To infer is to draw meaning that has not been explicitly stated. So we use inference a lot when we're trying to figure out poetry. All right, guys, that's a quick little video, not as quick as I'd hoped it would be, for just general terms you should know for the poetry unit. All right, I will talk to you again, I hope, real soon. Take care. Stay healthy.